Hello, I'm John Benson, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. This is the book that I have. It's been reprinted, I have no idea how many times, too many. It was first written in 1816 by Mary Shelley, who wasn't even 19 at the time she started writing it. I think everybody knows the story of Frankenstein, and I think everybody knows it from the film. I certainly did. I remember watching the film many times. Frankenstein, loved Frankenstein, and loved Dracula, and loved the Mummy, loved whatever, all those monster movies when I was a kid. Well, Godzilla probably being the most fun. But anyway, loving all those stories. And then when I was at UCLA, I read Bram Stoker's Dracula, and thought, well, I probably should read Frankenstein also. And I finally got around to it. Oh, so this has been on my to-read list, and I've had this book around, or some version of it. No, I think I just got this. Yes, I just got this to read. But anyway, I've had this on my list to read for, over 30 years. And I finally read it, and it was difficult. I do these reviews in part because I have an English literature degree from UCLA, and I love reading, and I've read many books, and I certainly enjoy them, good and bad. I like reading, so it's all fine. But this book, which is only 160 some pages long, at least in this form, in form that this is a copy from the 1831 reprint that came in 3 volumes. 3 volumes for 166 pages, printed like this. But anyway, those pages were very difficult to read, to get through. And I have read Chaucer in Middle English. This is difficult language. The vocabulary is huge, and the writing and the sentence structure is complicated. It is difficult to follow. It's not necessarily dense. In fact, she sometimes takes a very long time to say something that in our modern world, or in a modern book, it would be a very quick little sentence, like, I sat down. She can't write. She doesn't write that way. She writes that the feelings of remorse that was felt compelled me to, filled me, or filled is too short of a word, with fatigue such that I had to seat my weary soul. I mean, that is the type. I just made that up, but that's the gist of how difficult the language is. And it's different too. The biggest difference and most notable thing, obviously, is that Frankenstein's monster in the book is nothing like, well, I shouldn't say it. Frankenstein's monster in the book starts out being, or he says, with little voice and unable to read, but he does learn how to read, and I suppose write, and he ends up having as big a vocabulary and speaking in as complicated manner as everybody else in the book. Great. And it is so, funny sometimes, and there was actually words that I didn't even know. I had to look them up, which I just don't usually do that. And so here's one sentence. It's toward the end of the book, and this is Frankenstein's monster talking. And Frankenstein's monster says, I am well satisfied that abhorrence and opprobrium should load my memory. Once my fancy was soothed with dreams of virtue and of fame and of enjoyment. Once I falsely hoped to meet with the beings who, pardon me, my outward form would love me for the excellent qualities which I was capable of unfolding. That's Frankenstein's monster. So, not the grunting brute that is in the movies, but like many books, the movies did it better. We often say, "Oh, the book is always better." Well, I mean, people of that time may have liked the book better. I think one of the reasons why, and this is just speculation on my part, I certainly haven't researched this or anything. Everything I say on these reviews are really just off the top of my head thoughts. So my thought on this is that the reason why the language is so verbose, the reason why the sentence structure is so complicated, is that people in this era did not have many books, and so to make it worth buying, it had to be big. It had to be spectacular. It had to be more than just the typical words or language that people would speak. They didn't have internet or video games or TV at the time, so people who read anyway, I'm sure they would want books that would have words in it that they didn't know and had to look up. That would be fun, and they would certainly think about wanting a book that they could read over and over again, not just a book to get through the story or enjoy the story. They wanted something that had more to it than just the story. It has the words and all these different things to it. So fine. So I see where it is, I think. At least that's my speculation. And it's certainly understandable how it got so popular. It is quite a concept, quite a premise for the idea of creating life, creating some other life, and the idea of becoming godlike. And again, this is my speculation, but I'm sure it's been speculated many times in dissertations and book reports all over the place on this book, is that, at the time, new things were happening. It was the beginning of the industrial age, and even though the Renaissance had been around for a while and things had been going, this was fairly new. The ideas that you could invent things and things were changing in the world. It's understandable then, these ideas of creations or even making things, and even in common terms, we often talk about we make something and it's our baby. Somebody who puts a lot of effort and makes some kind of thing, like it could be as big as like making your own car in your garage, or as or just making a fantastic cake or something. That's your baby. It's more than just the thing. There's something more lively about it. There's some part of you in it. So I somewhat get that, and that certainly makes sense in Frankenstein, since the monster ends up speaking just like Frankenstein himself. But pretty much everybody speaks the same in the book, and the author kind of gets away with that because most of it is in the form of letters from supposedly a brother to a sister, and the brother is on some whatever ship going to the North Pole. So there's these letters. So what's really truly amazing is that it's a story within a story within a story and more, because it's the first, there's this brother and sister, but while the brother is writing the story, then he meets up with Dr. Frankenstein, and Dr. Frankenstein is telling him his story. So the brother is supposedly, the author is writing the story of the brother writing the story of Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein. Well, it's not doctor, it's just Frankenstein in the book. telling a story, and there's actually more. There's others in there too. There's also the creatures well, anyway, these different things, and in that way it's fun too. In a way, there's this complicated writing style, which again, I think that the complication was something that people expected more at the time. They wanted something to be complicated and not just a story that somebody would just tell. I mean, the book was a big deal. Books aren't so much of a big deal now, but it was a big deal then to even have a book. So it better be a big deal. And so there's these complications. And Bram Stoker also wrote Dracula, the original book, in that somewhat of format too. It's like diary writing and letters between people that were somewhat telling major parts of the story. This is almost all of the letters. So there are those fun things about it. I'm glad I read it. It certainly, it's hard for something to be that horrific, given the gore and horror movies that we have now. And this book is even, well, somewhat tamer than the movie. You certainly don't see much because it's in writing. But so it's hard. It's hard for me to think of this as a horror novel. It seems more like a novel to get inside the head of somebody, who is really intent on creating something, whatever that is, and how that can be such a difficult thing, or somewhat horrific, but again, not horror in the horror movie way that we have things today, but of that time, the idea that it still happened. I'm trying to get across that even today, there are people that get so involved with themselves, or are so involved with trying to do something, that they forget everything else or everybody else to a negative extent. And in that way, this book would relate to that, and that same quality happens today. Well, now some people are talking in the background, so thank you for watching this video. There wasn't much to it. It's Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Enjoy.